So UFC 306 has officially concluded, and as many of you know, leading into the event, I had mentioned many times that, my big goal here was one last homage, one last sign of respect to the great Lucas Tracy. He played a very influential role in my life, and, his absence has been tough for me. I'll be honest, but I think at a certain point I realized I was ready to move on. And I wanted, just again, one last sign of respect to the guy. And I think, look, if you just look at my pick rate for the event, I think it was an absolute success. Honestly, I think what I set out to accomplish, I accomplished. And I'm very proud of that. But one thing I will say, Sean O Malley versus Merab was interesting. And the reason it was interesting was because I and many others had a very particular viewpoint on how this fight was going to go. And what it all comes down to is how you manage the distance between yourself and your opponent. If you boil down MMA to just the most basic, fundamental, key thing you have to do to be successful, that's what it is. It's all about distance management. And that is why, every single breakdown Mighty Mouse does, he references this. He calls it the void. And that's a big reason why pure wrestling is dying in MMA. Because when you look at wrestling as a sport, what it teaches you is the mechanics of finishing takedowns. When you grab a hold of your opponent, how do you then put them on the ground? But in the context of MMA, it's very different because 90% of finishing a takedown comes from how you set it up and how you get into the position to take your opponent down. And one thing we've seen from Sean O Malley is he is a master at managing the space between him and his opponent. Why was Peter Yan able to take Sean down 6 times? Well, because Peter Yan is an elite striker, and because of that, he was able to get on the inside, get in Sean's face, and get deep on takedowns to the point that he was able to finish them. But what happened when he fought Aljamain Sterling? Well, Sean did not overextend at all in that fight, completely stayed on his bike, feinted, jabbed, teeped, and moved. And what we saw was Aljamain Sterling had zero ability to close the distance effectively. He just couldn't do it, and eventually he had to try to rush in to set something up, and, he got countered and he got finished. Then you look at Merab and you see a guy whose entire game plan and strategy is to just go at you, get in your face, constantly pressure you, give you no space to breathe. And of course, you would look at this and you would say, well, obviously, if he tries to do that to Sean O Malley, he's going to get caught at some point, and Sean is just way too dangerous. Because, look, if there was anything you could criticize Merab for in his past fights, it was not closing distance very effectively and getting caught and getting rocked by guys who are 5'4". But you look at this fight against Sean O Malley, he completely flipped the script. He completely changed his game plan, and it was beautiful. It was so smart and so beautiful. It was clear Merab's entire game plan was to minimize any opportunity Sean had to counter him cleanly. And what that led to was Merab being the one circling on the outside, staying on his bike, and not overextending at all. Every single time Sean feinted a right hand, Merab was backing away. He was trying to stay away from Sean. And Sean was not expecting this. Sean was expecting Merab to try to go at him. And, his entire game plan was going to be, I just got to hit him clean once. But because Merab was doing such a good job circling and staying away, it forced Sean to have to really try to step in if he wanted any opportunity to really sting Merab. And that's what he was waiting for. Because every time Sean overextended, that is when Merab went to work. And this was such a huge parallel to when Sean fought Aljo. Because Sean saw every single takedown Aljo attempted coming from a mile away. He was ready to grab a whizzer, grab wrist control, and Aljo just couldn't get anything done. But Merab was getting so deep on these takedowns because he was forcing Sean to throw punches and end up out of position. And it came from the fact that he just was not overextending. He was not giving Sean anything to work with. He did not throw a single right hand unless Sean put himself out of position trying to make something happen. This right here was my favorite takedown of the entire night. Merab is backing away, moving away from Sean. And now Sean is the one trying to close the distance, trying to walk at Merab, but that's exactly what he wanted. He was pulling him in just so he could run right into the takedown as soon as he stepped forward. And it is just so crazy because when the hell does Merab fight like this? It is just such a smart game plan to completely flip the script on Sean and change his game so much. once he got deep on these takedowns, that is where Merab's game shines. Obviously, Sean O Malley does not have the same ability as someone like Corey Sandhagen when it comes to scrambling on the ground. Merab seemed way physically stronger, and the craziest part was Merab actually went for some submissions against Sean. If you guys caught the Fight Companion last night, my buddy Jackson bet an absurd amount of money on Merab hitting a submission against Sean, and it would have paid out $10,000 if it happened. We were calling him crazy because when the hell does Merab go for submissions? But that first guillotine he jumped on was legitimately pretty tight. I mean, Sean had to roll all the way to his back in order to defend it. And that was another big area people were wondering about going into this fight was Sean's jiu-jitsu and Sean's submissions. We've been hearing a lot about it. Sean has hit a guillotine once in a big grappling competition. And you know what? Sean legitimately does have good submissions, but the problem is, again, the way Merab was managing distance, the way he was getting so deep on these takedowns. I mean, there's just no time to react from a position like this, right? If you get this deep on a takedown while your opponent is this out of position, I mean, good luck wrapping up a guillotine in time. There's just no way. And other than that, the only time Sean really had an opportunity to work for any kind of a sub was when he was flat on his back in full guard. And that's another thing that I've talked about in depth on the channel is just the fact that from full guard, if you're not Charles Oliveira and you're not Brian Ortega, there's no point in even trying to stay there because, let's be real, there is very, very little you can go for from that position, and your opponent is going to be ready for all of those, let alone if it's somebody like Merab, who's so short, compact, scrambly, and explosive. There's just no way. But, with this all being said, I do think there is a silver lining here if you are a Sean O Malley fan. There has never been more of an opportunity for him to now fight Corey Sandhagen. I mean, come on, it's perfect. Corey Sandhagen's coming off a loss against Umar. Sean's now coming off a loss. Make Umar versus Merab, which is a great fight. Make Corey versus Sean. That's an amazing fight. But, I mean, how would a fight between Umar and Merab go? I mean, again, Merab has shown in essentially every single fight prior to this to not do an amazing job managing distance, to be a little reckless at times because, he knew he had such a cardio and such a wrestling advantage over whoever he was fighting. But against somebody like Umar, it will be interesting. Umar, I would say, in terms of just straight up wrestling, I think he's genuinely a bit cleaner, just technically. I think he's got better submissions, better back takes, better control. I think he's a cleaner striker. And the hard part is if you're in Merab's corner, if you're part of his team, look, they had, again, such a beautiful game plan for Sean O Malley, and a big part of that was the fact that, their camp had just fought Sean prior. Whereas Umar, there's not a lot of film study for him. We don't know a lot of his weaknesses yet. Before the Corey Sandhagen fight, you would say it's going to be his boxing. Well, he's made massive improvements there. So it's a lot scarier of a matchup. There's a lot more unknowns, but, I mean, come on, that's got to be next. And look, I'm sure Dana White is probably on suicide watch. A lot of people are saying that this is the worst era of champions ever. Well, I mean, maybe in terms of marketability, sure, but look, in terms of skill, look, they're all world-class, of course. They're all world-class. I'll be honest, Merab absolutely surprised me with the changes he made to his game. I thought it was beautiful, thought it was respectable. And you know what? Nothing but respect to Merab.